Truth Espresso, episode 382.
In a world gone bonkers.
It is not, generally speaking, unruly, but fires have been started and...
Where the culture is a dumpster fire.
We're coming for your children.
And churches have lost their way.
I am really uncomfortable with the story of the crucifixion.
It's time to wake up with Truth Espresso.
Truth Espresso.
Your weekly shot of truth. And now your host, Daniel Minnick.
Hey there! Welcome, Truth Espresso listeners. Welcome all, my friends, family, foes, and, of course, lurkers alike to yet another exciting episode of Truth Espresso in this series, continuing our walkthrough of the Book of Mormon. And it seems like this Book of Alma and the Book of Mormon has dragged on because there's just a lot of details in it. And if you liked the last episode in this series, part 30, that had some battles, well, you're in for a treat for this episode because it is yet another episode with all kinds of battle strategies and action and stuff like that. And we are making headway, getting closer to finishing the Book of Alma. And I anticipate that the next episode in this series will actually accomplish that amazing feat. So if you are just tuning in, this is part 31 of our walkthrough. And so if this is the first episode of Truth Espresso that you are listening to, or at least in this series, well, you've got 30 episodes to catch up on if you want the whole story thus far. Because you might be a little out of place if you're not familiar with the Book of Mormon and you're just tuning in to Alma chapter 52. But I will do a very brief summation of the last episode in this series to kind of get you up to speed for what we're about to cover in this episode. So in the last episode, we covered the story of how a rogue Nephite named Amalickiah gathered a following to become king, and Captain Moroni of the Nephites and his loyalists basically chased Amalickiah and his followers out of town. So Amalickiah and his followers joined the Lamanites. Amalickiah convinced the king of the Lamanites to attack the Nephites, but a large group of Lamanites refused. So Amalickiah, through fraud, became leader of the Lamanite armies, and then killed the king of the Lamanites and lied about what happened. So the Lamanites made him king, and he led armies then to attack the Nephite cities, but Captain Moroni fortified them strongly. The Nephites had about 4 years of unprecedented peace and prosperity, but Amalickiah swore he would drink Moroni's blood. Eventually, the Lamanite armies managed to capture some fortified Nephite cities. Captain Moroni wanted to recover them strategically, and when we last left off at the end of the last episode in this series, a Nephite captain named Teancum snuck into Amalickiah's tent while both sides were sleeping for the night, and he secretly killed Amalickiah. And we now return in chapter 52 of Alma to see how the Lamanites react when the dawn breaks. So we are currently around 66 BC, the 26th year of the reign of the judges. So 26 years after King Mosiah changed the government of Zarahemla to look more like a constitutional republic. Yeah, how coincidental is that, before the American colonies and how they became a constitutional republic? The Lamanite soldiers woke up to see their king Amalickiah dead, and they got scared, of course. They changed their tactics. instead of continuing north to take over the land Bountiful as they had planned, they fled and took refuge in the city of Mulek, M-U-L-E-K, that they had captured from the Nephites. Amalickiah's brother Ammoron, not Ammoron, Ammoron, became king of the Lamanites. King Ammoron led the Lamanite armies back into the fortified cities that they had captured to stay for the time being. The Nephite captain Teancum, the guy who killed Amalickiah, badly wanted to retake the cities they once fortified successfully, but felt it wasn't a good idea to try at this point. He prepared his armies for defense until Captain Moroni could send more soldiers. Moroni also delivered word of a strategy. Both sides had prisoners of war. Teancum should use this as leverage for a prisoner swap deal. Moroni also told him to gather his forces in the land Bountiful and defend the narrow neck of land that leads into it. And somehow there would be a way to strategize from there how to retake nearby cities. Moroni wished he could be there, but he was busy with Lamanites on the western seaside. Meanwhile, Lamanite King Ammoron sent word to the queen that his brother Amalickiah, her second husband, was killed. King Ammoron was determined to take Nephite territory on the east side, and this ended the year. The next year, Captain Moroni had fortified the southwest. He and his army were ready to go north to the land Bountiful and join Captain Teancum and his army to help recover cities. Before Moroni and his men joined Teancum and his men, Teancum was about to lead an attack to recover the city of Mulek. But when he saw the Lamanite forces there, he thought, "Nah, we're not quite ready for this yet." They went back to Bountiful to wait for Moroni's reinforcements, and that ended the year, the 27th year of the reign of the judges. At the beginning of the next year, Moroni and his forces arrived. Moroni and Teancum plotted how to retake Mulek. They sent some messengers to the Lamanite government of Mulek, whose name was Jacob, to say, "Hey, Jacob, buddy, can we meet halfway and chat?" But this Jacob was a Zoramite, so he refused. Remember, the Zoramites were the paganized Nephite outcast group that had such a grudge against the Nephites that they were more ruthless even than the Lamanites. So they also seemed to make good army captains and city governors for the Lamanites. Because Jacob would not entertain pleasantries, Moroni and Teancum plotted a way to get Jacob and some of his army out of Mulek. Teancum would lead a small army toward Mulek to look vulnerable and basically say, "Yoo-hoo, we're going to attack, hear us roar." Meanwhile, Moroni led an army to the west side of the city to wait for an opportunity. When Jacob saw this bait, he went with his army to clobber Teancum, and Teancum and his band ran away north toward the West Sea. Moroni then led some soldiers into Mulek and captured it. While leaving some men in the city to protect it, Moroni led others up to help Teancum and surround Jacob's army from the south side. Captain Lehi, remember him? The Lamanites were afraid of him because of what he and Moroni did to them several years ago. Lehi and a band came out of the city Bountiful to battle the Lamanites who were after Teancum. The Lamanites weren't ready for this. Lehi and his men were well rested, and the Lamanites were worn out. They were terrified of Lehi, but they didn't realize that they had even more to fear. Moroni was making his push toward their backside. The Nephite armies now surrounding the Lamanites basically said, "Give up your weapons and live, or taste our fury." Because Jacob was a Zoramite, he didn't want to surrender to the Nephites that he so despised. He refused and tried to make his men push down through Moroni's forces to escape to Mulek. The Lamanites fought ferociously and killed many Nephites, even wounding Moroni himself, but Jacob was slain. Lehi and his men on the north then attacked the back of the Lamanite forces and made some of them give up. Moroni told the others, "If you guys give up, we'll let you live." Many responded positively, but others refused, and they became prisoners of war. Thus, the Nephite armies got more Lamanite prisoners from the battle than the total who had died on both sides. And that ended chapter 52, and that was a long action-packed chapter, so let's move on to chapter 53. And it looks like the Nephites are getting some victories again. Captain Moroni set guards over the Lamanite prisoners, who made them bury all the casualties from both sides. Moroni and Lehi went to Mulek, where Lehi became the new governor of the city. After completing the burials, Teancum led the Lamanite prisoners into the city Bountiful to make them dig a defensive ditch around the city and build a wall around it to fortify. Moroni made his Lamanite prisoners work to fortify Mulek. The Lamanites who weren't among these prisoners were astonished and confused about what they were observing. Meanwhile, let's check out what was going on with the Ammonites. Remember the Ammonites? It's been a long time since we last visited them. They were the former Lamanites who converted with King Lamoni because of Ammon's missionary work. They also took a lifelong and perpetual generational vow of nonviolence. They basically became pacifists. However, at this time, they saw all the dangers the Nephites experienced in their battles with the Lamanites and thought, maybe we should arm ourselves and help with this defense. Helaman and his brothers, the sons of Alma the Younger, reminded them of their oath. But there were about 2,000 Ammonites who had not yet taken this oath, and they decided to arm themselves and join the Nephites. They took a different oath then to fight for liberty, and they asked Helaman to be their captain. And this ended the 28th year of the Judges and chapter 53. So now let's see what chapter 54 has to offer. Remember earlier that Moroni thought the Lamanite prisoners from Amalickiah could be leverage for a prisoner swap? Well, now was the time for it. In fact, Lamanite King Ammoron thought of it. He sent a message to Moroni asking if they could do it. Moroni, of course, was happy. He sent a letter to Ammoron, and I will summarize and paraphrase it like so. Hey, Ammoron, your brother started the war against us, and you seem happy to continue it. I want to let you know that the sword of God hovers over you and demands you repent from this. Murderers like you go to hell, but so far you haven't listened to doctrine like this, and you likely still won't. We are ready to be friends, but if you don't stop this fighting, God's vengeance will allow our armies to crush you all to death, and we will get our cities back. You have captured women and children from us, but we only captured soldiers from you. So if you want to do a prisoner swap, you need to agree to this. For every soldier we return to you, you will return one of our soldiers and any family that soldier has, wife, children. If you refuse, we will attack and retake even the land of Nephi that you took from us so long ago. We're pretty angry, okay? Don't comply and all of you will die. You've tried to conquer and kill us while we just wanted to protect ourselves. Sincerely yours, Captain Moroni. So when King Ammoron read the letter, he got angry and sent a letter back to his new pen pal, Captain Moroni. So Ammoron's letter basically said this: Dude, you murdered my brother Amalickiah. You think you threaten me? I want revenge. Here is my proposal. You lay down your weapons first, and we will lay down ours. If you don't agree to that, well, we can do your prisoner swap first. Then fight forever until you guys either become our slaves or you're all dead. So there. Oh, by the way, we're tired of your religious doctrines. If this God exists, well, he created us too. Oh, and if Satan and hell exist, well, you can join my brother Amalickiah there. You guys are the ones in the wrong, and our fighting was revenge for your past wrongs. I'm a proud Zoramite and Lamanite. Sincerely yours, Ammoron. Well, that was a fun little chapter of leaders writing each other threats and proposals, so let's see what chapter 55 has to offer. Needless to say, Captain Moroni didn't like this letter from Ammoron. He couldn't agree to the prisoner swap on such terms, and he believed Ammoron was being a hypocrite with his claims. He was determined to carry out his threat against the Lamanites until they cried uncle. Moroni searched for Lamanites among his people until he found out that there was a guy named Laman, of course, who happened to be one of the servants of the Lamanite king that Amalickiah killed through his fraud. So he sent Laman and some men to the city of Gid, Gid, which was one of the Nephite cities that the Lamanites captured. When the Lamanite guards around the city saw the band of men, Laman said, "Hey guys, I'm a Lamanite and got away from the Nephites while they slept, and we have some of their wine." The Lamanite soldiers were like, "Cool, can we have some of that wine? We're tired and thirsty." And Laman said, "Well, I'd kind of like to hold off on that until after we fight the Nephites." And the Lamanite guards are like, "But we're all tired and thirsty. If you share the wine with us, it will help strengthen us to fight the Nephites. Pretty please." So Laman was like, okay, if you put it that way. Drink up, fellas." And little did the Lamanite guards know that this wine was extra potent so that they would get drunk and fall asleep. And Laman and his band went back and told Moroni. Moroni was like, "Everything's according to plan." He sent some warriors past the sleeping Lamanite guards and gave weapons to the Nephite prisoners, including women and children. However, Moroni didn't want to take advantage and kill the Lamanites. So when the guards woke up in the morning, they noticed Nephite soldiers surrounding them and that their prisoners had weapons. The Lamanite guards and their captains surrendered their weapons. The Nephites captured the city of Gid and freed the prisoners and took the Lamanites as prisoners of war. Once again, Moroni made the new prisoners of war work to fortify the city of Gid for the Nephites. He then sent the prisoners to the city Bountiful to add to its defense. Lamanite soldiers then came and tried to surround the city of Gid, but only succeeded in getting some of their prisoners killed. They tried the tactic of Laman to lure the Nephites with wine, but the Nephite guards would let their Lamanite prisoners have it first to test it for poison. And next on Moroni's agenda, recover the city of Morianton. And this would be difficult because the Lamanites made it one of their most fortified cities. The 29th year of the judges ended, and also chapter 55, so let's see what chapter 56 says.
The good news is Striving for Eternity would love to come to your church to spend 2 days with your folks teaching them biblical hermeneutics. That's right, the art and science of interpreting Scripture. The bad news is somebody attending might be really upset to discover Jeremiah 29:11 should not be their life verse. To learn more, go to strivingforeternity.org to host a Bible interpretation made easy seminar in your area.
So at the beginning of the 30th year of the judges, Moroni received a letter from Helaman that kind of covered his battles and his struggles about 3 years' time. It said something like, "Hey, my man Moroni, love you, bro. Just to bring you up to speed, 2,000 Ammonites have joined me to protect our land in battle. I know you know about the oath of nonviolence that the Ammonites as a whole have taken, but these guys are an exception. Well, I am pleased to report that they fought valiantly and happily. The Lamanites kind of won and, they took over a bunch of our cities. So I came to the city of Judea and saw Captain Antipas and his men struggling to fight off a bunch of Lamanites. Well, they managed to hold off attacks, and King Ammoron decided not to take over Judea. Oh, by the way, Antipas and Judea are both Hellenized Greek names that shouldn't have existed in ancient America at this time. Just so we're clear. So then we sent spies to watch the Lamanites and see if we could attack them from behind, but we were wrong. However, they decided not to invade more cities, but to fortify the ones they've already taken. And then we got 2,000 more troops from Zarahemla. This made the Lamanites nervous, so they figured they would try to stop our supply lines. So we decided to trick them. I and a group of men went toward a nearby city as if we were delivering supplies. We got near the city of Antipara and were going to pass it on our way, and Antipas was also nearing the city. In that city, we noticed there was a big old army of Lamanites there. Lamanite spies saw us and let the army know we were coming, so they ran northward and they ran after us. Antipas came up behind them. They realized that, but they were determined to take us out first so they wouldn't be surrounded. Both sides rested for the night. However, the Lamanites got up early in the morning to get us. When we woke up and found out, we continued into the desert. This pursuit continued until the next night. The Lamanites set up camp and stayed longer, and we deliberated if we should try to attack them. My young sons were brave and said, "God's with us and won't let us die. We won't attack if they won't, but let's make sure Antipas, who's coming up at them from behind, will be okay." So I and my 2,000 soldiers went back down to face the Lamanites. We found that Antipas and his army had already attacked and were mostly victorious, but they were weak and weary. Good thing we decided to go, or they might have been goners. Antipas and other leaders were dead. His men were about ready to give up, so my men and I charged, and the Lamanites turned around to fight us. We won and forced the survivors to give up their weapons and become our captives. Miraculously, my army had no casualties. There were too many prisoners to handle to keep away from other Lamanite armies, so we sent some prisoners with what was left of Antipas's men to Zarahemla. The rest we took with us to the city of Judea. And that was the end of chapter 56, and Helaman's letter to Moroni continues. Now, remember Moroni's pen pal, King Ammoron of the Lamanites? Well, Ammoron sent a letter to Helaman that he recounted to Moroni. Let's see what Ammoron said to Helaman after his last scathing letter to Moroni, paraphrasing and summarizing here. "Hey, Helaman, let's make a deal. If you return our prisoners, I'll give you the city of Antipara." And Helaman wrote a letter back saying something like, "I appreciate the offer, but come on, man. We could easily take the city of Antipara by force. No need for an exchange for it. You think I'm stupid or something? We will only return your prisoners as part of a prisoner swap, as we said before." King Ammoron wasn't happy either. He didn't want to do a prisoner swap except on the terms he said before. So Helaman and an army went to capture the city of Antipara like he said they could do, and it turned out to be even easier than expected, because the Lamanites in the city just ran away and left it up for grabs. And that ended the 28th year of the judges. Remember, this is currently the 38th year, but this is Helaman's letter still to Moroni. So earlier the next year, the 29th year of the judges, Zarahemla sent more supplies and soldiers for Helaman's army. Thus 6,000 men joined Helaman's band of 2,000 and the 60 surviving Ammonites. Next on the agenda, recovering the city of Cumeni, Cumeni, Cumeni. Right before the Lamanites in the city were about to get some supplies, the Nephites camped around the city. And when Lamanites would try to go out and attack, the Nephites would kill them. The Lamanites were getting desperate because supplies weren't getting in, but they wouldn't give up the city. The Nephites would intercept the supplies and send them to Zarahemla. Eventually, the Lamanites gave up the city. Yay! 2 cities retrieved. However, there were so many Lamanite prisoners of war that it became unwieldy to manage them. Some of the prisoners tried to rebel and break free and had to be killed. So some of the Nephite soldiers started to take the Lamanite prisoners down to Zarahemla. Meanwhile, King Ammoron sent an army of Lamanites to attack and bring supplies to the city. Thankfully, the men who were going with prisoners down to Zarahemla returned just in time to save the otherwise outnumbered Nephite army. We'll see later why this army returned to help Helaman instead of bringing the prisoners to Zarahemla. Helaman's 2,060 men fought valiantly and dutifully obeyed orders. They drove the Lamanite army back to the city of Monte. Some of the soldiers who returned from Zarahemla died, but amazingly none of Helaman's 2,060 men did, even though they were all badly wounded. At the city of Cumeni they all recovered from their wounds, and this increased their faith. Helaman asked Gid, the leader of the band who were taking Lamanite prisoners to Zarahemla, "What happened? Why did you turn around?" And Gid basically said, "Well, as we were on our way to Zarahemla, we ran into our spies who told us the Lamanites were heading toward Cumeni where you guys were. And when our prisoners heard this news, they tried to rebel, and we had to kill most of them. A few of them escaped, but we knew we shouldn't try to capture them because we had to go back and help you. Thank God for this providence that helped us all beat the Lamanites and keep the city, because you guys would have been in danger." And Helaman also received word of what happened and was happy too. So when Helaman heard what Gid told him, he was just as happy as Gid was. And so that's the end of chapter 57. So let's move on to our last chapter for this episode, chapter 58. And Helaman's letter continues for the 3rd chapter. Helaman's forces have now found themselves on a providential winning streak that has allowed them to recover several cities. Next on the list, take back the city of Monte. They realized that the strategies they used to get the city of Gid wouldn't work for Monte, and the Lamanite army there was way too large for Helaman's army at this point. It was best to wait for more men and supplies from Zarahemla. Helaman sent someone to the governor of Zarahemla to ask for such help. Alas, the Lamanites were also getting their own reinforcements and supplies, so there was no advantage there if they got reinforcements. The Lamanites were also plotting strategies against the Nephites. Helaman and his men were eventually getting low on supplies, waiting for this reinforcements, and that they were starting to get near starvation. Fortunately for them, 2,000 men arrived in time with sustenance, but Helaman didn't understand why there weren't more men. They kind of needed more, it seemed. Helaman and his army started to get nervous, worrying that God would allow their lands to get annihilated. They prayed, and God granted them a subliminal assurance that they would be victorious. The reinvigorated but vastly outnumbered army of Helaman determined to storm the city of Monte. They pitched tents outside by the desert. The Lamanites sent spies to assess the Nephite army. The Lamanites figured, they're weak, but we don't want them cutting off our supplies. We should just go out and take care of business. Helaman sent Gid and a guy named Teomner, Teomner, each with a small band into the desert, one band on the left side and the other on the right. As the huge Lamanite army got near Helaman and his army, they ran away into the desert up past the two small bands who were on either side. As the Lamanite army passed between the two bands, because they didn't see them, in pursuit of Helaman's army, the two bands snuck up behind and captured the Lamanite army's spies. The bands then ran down to the city of Monte and took out the guards that stayed behind and captured the city. You see, the Lamanite army had been so zealous to take out Helaman's army that they left the city vulnerable. Meanwhile, Helaman and his army led the pursuing Lamanites towards Zarahemla. The Lamanite army started to get scared, wondering what surprise Helaman was plotting for them near Zarahemla. The Lamanites then headed back through the desert to Monte. They decided, it's night now. Let's call it a night. But Helaman had told his army not to sleep, but to work their way around the Lamanites by night and get back to Monte. Because they marched during the night, they got ahead of the Lamanite armies closer to Monte. The confused Lamanites realized that they were now in the desert and Helaman's army had taken over the city of Monte without even a battle. By this time, it was near the end of the 29th year of the Judges. Helaman knew his forces were small compared to the Lamanites. He didn't understand why Zarahemla sent so few reinforcements. Perhaps there are schisms in the government there. Whatever the case, he knew God had helped them thus far and protected the 2,060 men especially. Now, about those wounded but surviving men, verse 40 says, quote, "But behold, they have received many wounds. Nevertheless, they stand fast in that liberty wherewith God has made them free." Hath made them free. Now, does some of this sound familiar? Why, yes, it's plagiarized from Galatians 5:1, where the Apostle Paul wrote, "Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage." Hey, at least we found a plagiarism for this episode. It wasn't a total loss on that front, right? And this is not the first time that the Book of Mormon has plagiarized Galatians 5:1. Anyway, so Helaman concluded his letter to Moroni, and that concludes this episode of Truth Espresso. What will Captain Moroni do next? Especially since we're coming closer to the end of the Book of Alma. Will Helaman find out what's going on in Zarahemla? Stay tuned to the next episode of Truth Espresso in this series to find out. And God bless.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truth Espresso. Be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast app. Truth Espresso is a member of the Christian podcast community. Check out other great faith-building shows at christianpodcastcommunity.org.